Shiv, extremely worrying. If you look at it in context, this is the first incident reported post what went down in 2020 in the Galwan Valley.
That's correct, Preeti. This is in fact the Tawang sector, which is here, which is, this entire bit is Arunachal Pradesh. You've got the Bhutan border here, and that's Tibet over there. Now, the Yangtze border, between India and Tibet is where this clash reportedly took place. The information that's coming out from the army at this time says some minor injuries of a few soldiers on both sides, but we are given to understand that it's a little bigger than that. There appear to have been more than 200-300 troops on the Chinese side, perhaps an equal number on the Indian side, and there have been some injuries. Some of them apparently pretty serious. There are some fractures, etc. At least 2 people we've spoken to have said no casualties of any kind, but there were more casualties on the Chinese side, because the Indian side were actually, they'd taken the initiative to defend against what was turning out to be a very aggressive Chinese patrol. It was in October 2021, Preeti, just over a year ago, where a similar kind of confrontation had taken place between Indian and Chinese troops. But in that case, some Chinese troops had been kept behind, as a result of them defying certain patrolling, protocols in that area. And remember, all of this is happening in the shadow of what's happening in eastern Ladakh since 2020. Violence that has taken place between Indian and Chinese troops in Sikkim, which is not very far from here as well. But in Tawang, especially the Tawang sector border, Preeti, there have been confrontations in the past. It continues to be a pretty restive frontier between both sides. We're still getting details about the scale of this particular confrontation, though.
Especially the area, Shiv, that you're pointing out, could it also be a spin-off of possibly China being rather angry with Bhutan aligning with India, especially when it comes to border strategic control?
That has always been one of the factors, Preeti. In fact, if you look at patrolling in Sikkim, if you look at patrolling in the Tawang sector, all of these things have played a factor. But let's remember that whether it is Tawang, whether it is Eastern Ladakh, whether it is the central sector, whether it is Sikkim, the border protocol between India and China has largely, held pretty firm. What happened in Galwan was a complete breakdown of that particular protocol, where the Chinese actually used weapons, lethal weapons in that brawl. In this particular confrontation, I am told that there were no weapons of any kind used. It was a hand-to-hand brawl of the kind that we've seen in different places, including in Pangong, including in Sikkim, and earlier also in the Tawang sector of Arunachal Pradesh. So no reason to believe that there was any violation of the existing norms in terms of the use of weapons. But remember, when two patrolling parties cross each other, there is a set-down norm list of norms, Preeti, for disengagement. They talk. They don't, no hostile maneuvers are mounted. There is no aggressive show of force of any kind. Nobody's supposed to raise their voice. Nobody's supposed to make any threatening gestures of any kind. But in this particular case, as has happened in the past, all it takes is a slight trigger, a little bit of pushing, a little bit of dhakka mukhi, someone throws a punch and things just escalate from there. And when you've got a lot of people concentrated in one small area, injuries, the fists can fly, legs can fly, people can get injured pretty badly, because these are military personnel stationed in one of the most hostile battlefields of the world. So like I said, once again, in Pangong, you had about 100 troops on both sides. In Galwan, you had about 400, troops on the Indian side, many more troops on the Chinese side. In this particular case as well, I'm told over 100 troops on both sides. So the precise scale of those injuries is not known just yet, but this seems to have been a pretty routine patrol that just went out of hand.
All right, routine patrol that went out of hand, but a larger picture there, Abhishek, because if you do look at, the diplomatic cues between India and China, they've practically cold-shouldered each other. G20, nothing really quite happened. No meeting between the Prime Minister and the Chinese counterpart.
Well, that's true, Preeti, and the way relations were derailed since Ladakh, things haven't gotten back on track. And it's not just the military relationship that has deteriorated, but even at the political and diplomatic level, there has been no breakthrough. Remember, even as far as the military talks are concerned in Ladakh, there is no breakthrough there as well. And in the initial phase of that dialogue, which was only restricted to military commanders from both sides, Later, we had a diplomat from both sides being part of those talks as well to make sure things can smoothen out. But nothing really has happened. Yes, there has been some piecemeal disengagement in some areas, but there is no resolution, and that's the underlying factor. And while there is no resolution in Ladakh, places like Arunachal and Sikkim and even Uttarakhand, there has been a huge enhancement of deployment by the Indian side because of the mutual distrust between the two sides. And this is the story of the India-China relations over the last 2.5 years. And if you speak to anybody, they say this is the new status quo. Things are not likely to be getting any better.
Well, the new status quo, what does it augur in terms of the relationship between both countries? Shiv, I'll bring you in on this conversation again, like what we were talking since G20. It's not that India and China have really engaged, an incident like that, and you can't really decouple it from what went down in Ladakh or what's going down in Arunachal. Do you see that have any impact on the India-China relationship?
Preeti, the current, face-off between India and China, whether it is here in the Indo-Tibetan border or whether it is in Ladakh, the simple, unchangeable fact is the solution is going to have to be, a political one. Only the politicians can resolve the world's biggest military standoff and the way it is manifesting in eastern Ladakh, here in Tawang, in Sikkim and other places. Let me tell all of our viewers, Preeti, that there are minor confrontations between patrols that happen on literally a daily basis. They happen all the time on the India-China frontier as a result of, the differing perceptions of either the border or the line of actual control. But having said that, eastern Ladakh, what started in May 2020, led to the Galwan clash, and now the sort of limited disengagement that has taken place from there, doesn't mean that the situation has improved. It is still very much the same. China continues to aggressively build infrastructure, even though India is also doing the same. But the fact of the matter is, it is not a good situation as far as India is concerned, because China is far from their, so-called territory. They're at India's doorstep. India is on the defensive. They're having to aggressively defend Indian territory. So the status quo has changed. It's a new normal over there. And, depending on the military to resolve something like this is going to be global suicide. These are two of the most powerful militaries in the world, Preeti. They're also nuclear powered. They've got weapons of mass destruction below the nuclear threshold. So if this became a full-scale war, the damage on both sides would be unthinkable. And that's one of the reasons why there is a recognition on both sides that the resolution to this has to necessarily be political. There is no military solution to what's happening here.